her vision blurred white. Her heartbeat stuttered like a dying drum. Kira Ashford was a hollow shell, a shifter without a wolf, and the blizzard was claiming her. Then she heard it, a child's desperate howl. She used her last consciousness to free a wolf cub from a hunter's snare, an act that shredded her palms to bone and pumped poison into her veins. She collapsed, shielding him with her failing body, and woke up in chains. Because the cub she rescued was the son of the most feared man on the continent, the Alpha King. He found her unconscious, and now she's his. If you believe hollow shifters deserve respect just like anyone else, subscribe to this channel, like and comment Justice for Kira. Also, let me know where you're watching from. I want to know this community stands against prejudice. The wind was a predator, tearing through the 4 layers of stolen clothing Kira Ashford had scavenged. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. For 3 years, enough had been a distant memory. She was running, always running. First from the burning remains of her old pack, the Thornwood Vale pack, and the chemical stench of the engineered sickness that had stolen her family, and worse, her wolf. Then from the human militias whose territory she'd accidentally violated near a settlement called Ember's End. Now she was running from the cold, a relentless, consuming hunter that was finally closing in. Her wolf, the part of her that should have generated warmth and resilience, was silent. It had been silent for 3 years, ever since the massacre. It left her hollow, a creature less than human, less than wolf, an outcast in both worlds. She was a rogue by circumstance, but she felt more like a phantom. This land, the frozen expanse of the Cascade Wilderness, was merciless. She knew she was trespassing. This was Conclave territory, ruled by the mythical Alpha King Theron Blackveil. Stories of his brutality were whispered like prayers among the rogues. Trespassers weren't captured. They were eliminated. But the snowstorm had driven her here, forcing her across an unmarked border. Now her strength was depleted. Her meager supplies, a frozen protein bar and a canteen of ice, were long exhausted. Hypothermia was settling in, a seductive, numbing venom. Just a little rest, a treacherous voice murmured in her mind. Just close your eyes. She stumbled, collapsing hard against the frozen bark of a spruce. The impact sent a cascade of snow down, momentarily blinding her. She didn't have the energy to brush it away. This is it. This is where I die. And then she heard it. It wasn't the wind. It was a high-pitched, terrified cry. It was the sound of a child. Adrenaline, a long-forgotten ally, surged through her. It was a weak, watered-down tremor, but it was enough. She forced herself up, her frozen knees screaming. "Hello!" she croaked, her voice swallowed by the wind. Another cry. This one strangled with agony. She commanded her legs to move, pushing through a massive drift, following the desperate sound. She rounded a wall of snow-laden pines, and her stomach plummeted. It was a wolf cub, no more than 4 or 5 by human standards, with a coat the color of moonlight and terrified, intelligent amber eyes. His front right leg was caught, not in a snare, in a massive steel-jawed hunter's trap, and it was silver. Kira gagged as the scent assaulted her. Not just the metallic tang of the cub's blood, but the sharp, acidic burn of silver. It was woven into the trap's teeth, a sadistic design meant not just to capture, but to poison a shifter. The cub was thrashing, the silver searing deeper into his leg, the toxin already spreading into his small body. "Shh. It's okay," Kira whispered, her hands trembling so violently she could barely function. "I'm here. I'm going to help." The cub growled weakly, a tiny rumble of defiance. "I know," she said, her voice breaking. "It hurts." She knew what this would cost her. She was already dying. Her body was shutting down. To touch that much silver, even to free him, it would be the end. The poison would flood her system, and with her destroyed healing, it would be fatal. She looked at the cub's amber eyes, so full of terror. They were the same eyes as her little brother Finn, just before the chemical fires started. Damn them all. She wasn't going to die as a coward. "This is going to hurt," she panted, more to herself than the cub. She knelt, her knees sinking into the blood-stained snow. She ignored the warning alarms shrieking in her own head. She grabbed the 2 release bars of the trap. The second her gloveless palms made contact with the silver-laced steel, her world detonated. It was not a burn. It was an unmaking, a deep cellular destruction. It felt like acid being poured straight into her marrow. Her blood ignited. A scream ripped from her, but the blizzard stole it away. She roared, a broken human sound, and put every fragment of her remaining life, all her rage, all her grief, into her arms. She pulled. Her hands were disintegrating. She could feel the skin peeling, the metal grinding against bone. The smell of her own searing flesh mixed with the silver. The trap groaned. The cub yelped, a new, sharper sound as the pressure shifted. "Almost there," Kira screamed. With a final, agonizing sob, she wrenched the bars far enough apart. The teeth released their grip. Click. The cub scrambled free, dragging his wounded leg and whimpering. Kira collapsed backward. She stared at her hands. They were obliterated, blackened, bloody, and smoking. The silver poisoning was instantaneous. It shot up her arms like frozen fire, filled with razors. Her heart convulsed. The cub, instead of fleeing, limped back to her. He nudged her face, whimpering, licking the frozen tears from her cheek. "Go," she managed to whisper. "Get home." She was so cold, but her arms were burning. She tried to move, to crawl, to do anything, but her limbs were no longer obeying. The world was spinning. Black spots danced in her vision, merging with the whiteout of the storm. The cub let out a desperate, mournful howl. Kira used her last coherent thought to act. She fumbled, her ruined hands clumsy, and pulled the small, warm body against her own. She curled around him, using her freezing, dying body as a fragile shield against the wind. At least, she thought as the darkness finally swallowed her, I saved one. At least I die warm. The last thing she heard before the silence was the sound of a much larger, much deeper howl answering the cub's cry. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated fury. Alpha King Theron Blackveil, ruler of the Obsidian Summit Conclave, despised bureaucracy. He was a creature of action, of instinct. His wolf, a massive obsidian beast that mirrored his soul, prowled constantly under his skin. But a king, he had learned, was a prisoner of policy documents and alliances. He was in his war room at Shadow Peak, a fortress of obsidian and ancient granite carved into the face of Mount Sovereign. Before him sat his chief advisor, Counselor Varen Frost, a man whose silver-streaked hair and composed demeanor concealed a calculating mind. "The Iron Ridge Pack is probing our borders again, sire," Varen said, his voice a smooth tenor. They claimed their scouting parties were disoriented, but Theron held up a hand, silencing him. He wasn't listening. His head was tilted, a frown creasing his features. "Sire," Varen asked. "Quiet," Theron commanded. His gaze fixed on the reinforced window where the blizzard raged. He felt a wrongness, a cold spike of dread that had nothing to do with Iron Ridge. It was a feeling he'd only experienced twice before, the day his father's convoy was ambushed, and the day his mate Elara had died giving birth to their son, Cassius. He shot to his feet, the heavy stone chair scraping violently against the obsidian floor. He opened his mouth to summon his gamma, but the mind-link connection crashed into him first. It was Sylvan Reed, his head of security. The link wasn't a calm report. It was pure, unadulterated panic. Theron's blood turned to ice. Theron didn't hear the rest. The world dissolved into a crimson haze of terror and rage. His son, his heir, his only connection to Ilara, out there alone. He didn't use the door. He launched himself through the reinforced window. The glass, designed to withstand artillery, exploded into 1,000 shards as his body erupted into its true form. He was no longer Theron the King. He was a monster. He was a wolf the size of a bear, all obsidian fur, burning golden eyes, and claws that carved trenches in the frozen earth. He hit the ground running, letting out a roar that shook Shadow Peak to its foundations. It was not a call. It was a threat to existence itself. He bellowed over the packlink, a command that sent every shifter in the conclave mobilizing. He followed the faint, fading scent of his son. He was the king. His senses were unmatched, but the storm was a living, breathing beast, shredding the scent trails to nothing. He ran for what felt like an eternity, his heart a frozen stone of dread. He was tracking a nightmare. He was tracking his worst fear. Counselor Varen and Gamma Lysander, both in their powerful wolf forms, flanked him. Sylvan projected, his gray wolf veering east, but Theron smelled it first. It was a scent that stopped his heart. Silver, and beneath it, blood. His son's blood. Theron's roar of denial became a sound of pure madness. He ran faster than he had ever run, his paws barely touching the ground. And then he caught the third scent. It was faint, weak. A female, a rogue. She smelled of sickness, of brokenness, and strangely, of cedarwood and frost. Varen's mind link snapped. Theron's rage peaked. Varen was right. A rogue had infiltrated, stolen his son, and he burst through the clearing, Sylvan and Varen at his heels. He was prepared to find a slaughter. He was prepared to find an Iron Ridge operative holding his son hostage. He was prepared to tear reality apart. He was not prepared for what he found. He skidded to a halt, the snow erupting in a massive wave. There, in a drift, was a figure. A small, motionless woman in tatters, her body curled into a protective crescent, and tucked against her chest, shivering but alive, was his son, Cassius. Cassius whimpered, seeing his father, and tried to crawl toward him, his front leg dragging. Theron's rage evaporated, replaced by a dizzying, overwhelming relief. He took a half-step forward, his mind struggling to process the scene. The rogue. She wasn't moving. She was terrifyingly still. Her face was blue with cold, her lips ashen. Her hands, Theron's gaze locked on her hands. They were destroyed, a bloody, blackened wreckage of flesh and bone. The stench of silver and burned skin rose from them, a testament to an agony he could barely fathom. "Papa," Cassius whimpered. "The lady, she saved me. The trap. It hurt." Theron looked from his son to the trap, the silver-laced jaws, the blood. He looked at the woman's hands. He looked at her body, which was positioned to absorb the brunt of the blizzard, leaving Cassius sheltered. She hadn't attacked his son. She had used her last breath to save him. She had chosen to die in agony to save a child she didn't know. Sylvan's mind link was hesitant, full of disbelief. Theron shifted back into his human form, the cold and wind irrelevant. He was bare, but he didn't feel it. He gently scooped up his son, pressing Cassius's small, cold face against his neck. "It's all right, my son. You're safe." He then turned to the woman. She was small, broken, and yet a strange, foreign sensation pulled at his core. A resonance, a recognition. His wolf, which had been seconds from tearing her throat out, was now whining. "Protect," it said. "Ours." Impossible, Theron thought, disgusted. This was no time for the moon goddess's twisted games. He looked at her obliterated hands and felt a reluctant, furious respect. "Sylvan," he ordered, his voice the low, dangerous rumble of the king. "Find who set this trap. I don't care who it is. I want them eliminated." He removed his heavy fur-lined cloak, which had materialized with his shift back, and wrapped it around the unconscious woman. He lifted her as easily as he had Cassius. She weighed almost nothing. He cradled his son in one arm and his son's savior in the other. He commanded, handing Cassius off to his advisor. He started the long run back to Shadow Peak, his mind a tempest of fury, relief, and a terrifying, unwelcome new emotion. He had his son back, but he had just found something that might be even more dangerous. Kira woke to warmth, and that was her first mistake. She shouldn't be warm. She should be dead, frozen in a drift with her ruined hands clutching a child she'd never see again. But the warmth was real, seeping into her bones like a forbidden mercy. She tried to move, and agony exploded through her arms, a reminder that death might have been kinder. Her eyes cracked open to soft amber light. The ceiling above her was vaulted stone, ancient and smooth, carved with symbols she didn't recognize. For a moment, she thought she'd somehow stumbled into a sanctuary, some forgotten temple where rogues went when they died. Then she turned her head and saw the bars. They weren't crude prison bars. They were elegant, wrought from black iron that gleamed like polished obsidian, each one as thick as her wrist and etched with silver inlay that made her wolf, what remained of it, whimper in the back of her consciousness. The bars stretched from floor to ceiling, transforming the luxurious room into an elaborate cage. A bed with silk sheets, a private washroom with marble fixtures, a barred window overlooking snow-capped peaks, a cell designed not for criminals but for valuable prisoners. She tried to sit up and her hands screamed. She looked down and nearly vomited. They were wrapped in pristine white bandages, but she could see the dark stains seeping through, smell the medicinal herbs trying and failing to mask the scent of her own burned flesh. She remembered the trap, the silver, the awful sound of her skin sizzling. She remembered the cub. The door opened, not the barred gate but a secondary door beyond it, and a man entered. He was older, perhaps 50, with kind eyes and silver-streaked brown hair pulled into a neat tail. He wore healer's robes, deep green embroidered with the phases of the moon. He carried a tray of supplies and moved with the calm efficiency of someone accustomed to broken things. "You're awake," he said, his voice gentle. "I'm Lysander, head healer of Shadow Peak. You're extraordinarily lucky to be alive." Lucky felt like the wrong word. She tried to speak, but her throat was desert dry. He poured water from a crystal pitcher, helped her drink. The liquid burned going down. "Where?" she croaked. "Where am I?" "Shadow Peak Fortress, the Obsidian Summit Conclave. You're in the king's personal detention wing." He began unwrapping her hands with practiced care. "The silver poisoning should have killed you within minutes. The fact that you survived 3 hours in a blizzard with that much toxin in your system is frankly impossible." "The cub!" Kira gasped. "Is he? Prince Cassius is alive because of you." Lysander's expression softened. "You saved the Alpha King's son, but that doesn't mean you're free." The secondary door opened again and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Kira looked up and her heart stopped. He was massive, not just in height but in presence, filling the space like a storm front. The Alpha King, Theron Blackveil. He wore black-on-black leather and wool that looked more like armor than clothing. His face was carved from granite, all sharp angles and cold fury. His eyes were molten gold, predator's eyes, and they were fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to disappear. "Out," he said to Lysander without looking away from her. The healer hesitated, then bowed and retreated, the bars closing with a resonant clang behind him. Theron approached the bars slowly, a wolf circling prey. "Who sent you?" he said. His voice was low, controlled, each word precisely chosen. Iron Ridge? The Southern Claw? Someone inside my own conclave? Kira's mind reeled. No one sent me. I was running from the storm. I didn't even know whose territory this was until it was too late. His laugh was bitter. A rogue just happens to find my son alone in a blizzard, in a trap meant specifically for shifter children, on the most remote edge of my territory? Try again. I heard him crying, Kira said, her voice gaining strength. I heard a child in pain and I couldn't. I wouldn't just leave him. His eyes narrowed. You're hollow. I can smell it on you. No wolf, no pack. You're less than nothing in our world, and yet you want me to believe you risked your life for a stranger's child? Yes. He moved closer to the bars, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his eyes, smell the winter and smoke and something wild that made her hollow chest ache. Why? What do you gain? Nothing, she whispered. I gain nothing. I couldn't let another child die because I was too weak to save them. Something flickered in his expression, too fast to read. He reached through the bars, his hand moving toward her face, perhaps to test her, perhaps to intimidate. His fingers brushed her cheek. The world exploded. It wasn't pain. It was recognition, a cosmic snap that reverberated through her entire being. The mate bond, something she thought she'd never feel, crashed into her like a tidal wave. Her hollow wolf, silent for 3 years, suddenly screamed to life in her mind. Mate, ours, claim. Theron jerked back as if she'd burned him, his eyes wide with something that looked like horror. No, he breathed. No. This is impossible. Kira's hands were shaking, her entire body trembling. You feel it too, she whispered. Don't you? He stared at her, and in his eyes she saw fury and disgust and something that might have been grief. You are my fated mate, he said, his voice sharp as broken glass, and it is fate's most vicious mockery. A hollow rogue who trespassed into my territory and somehow found my son alone in a trap meant to kill him. The mate bond doesn't make you innocent. It makes you dangerous. He turned and walked to the door. You are a prisoner, he said without looking back, and you will remain one until I know the truth. The door closed behind him with a finality that echoed through the cell. Kira sat alone in her gilded cage, her hands throbbing, her wolf suddenly awake and howling for a mate who looked at her like she was poison, and wondered if dying in the snow might have been the kinder fate after all. The council chamber was a cathedral of power, all vaulted ceilings and obsidian columns that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Theron sat in the high seat, a throne carved from a single piece of black granite, and watched as Councillor Varen Frost laid out his case with the precision of a master strategist. The evidence is circumstantial but compelling, Varen said, his silver-streaked hair catching the torchlight as he gestured to the maps spread across the war table. Iron Ridge has been probing our borders for months. Now a rogue appears, hollow and harmless, precisely where the prince would be hunting. The trap itself was sophisticated, designed specifically to capture without killing immediately, to draw out a rescue. And you believe this rogue was the bait? Alpha Garrett of the Northern Ridge Pack rumbled from his seat. That my son was the target and she was meant to gain our trust? Varen's expression was grave, concerned, perfectly calibrated. I believe it's a possibility we cannot ignore, sire. The timing is too convenient, the location too precise. We must consider that Iron Ridge has found a way to weaponize our own compassion. Theron's jaw clenched. The mate bond hummed beneath his skin, a constant irritating presence that made rational thought nearly impossible. His wolf snarled at the suggestion of executing their mate, yet his mind demanded answers. Execute her, Alpha Garrett said flatly. Send a message to whoever sent her. No. The word came out harder than Theron intended. The council fell silent. We investigate first. I want to know who set that trap. I want to know how a hollow rogue survived 3 hours of silver poisoning. And I want to know if Iron Ridge is bold enough to target my heir on my own land. Varen bowed his head, the picture of loyal concern. Of course, sire. I merely wanted to ensure we considered all possibilities. Wisdom demands caution. Theron dismissed the council with a wave, but the unease followed him like a shadow. He ordered doubled patrols, increased surveillance, and a full investigation into the trap's origin. What he didn't order was the execution his council expected, and that omission would not go unnoticed. 3 days passed. Lysander came twice daily to change Kira's bandages, his kind eyes troubled. "There's something in your blood," he said on the 3rd evening, holding a vial up to the light. "A compound I've never seen before. It's not natural. Someone put this in you." "What does it do?" Kira asked, though part of her already knew. "I think," Lysander said carefully, "it's blocking your wolf, and the silver is burning it out." That night, Kira lay awake in her gilded prison, staring at the ceiling and trying not to think about the Alpha King's golden eyes or the way the mate bond pulled at her chest like a fishhook. She was alone. She would always be alone. Even fate's gift had come wrapped in chains. Then she heard it. A soft scratching at the base of the barred gate, quiet and cautious. She sat up, her bandaged hands aching. The scratching stopped. Something small slid under the gap between the bars and the stone floor. Paper. She crawled from the bed, her heart hammering, and picked it up. It was a drawing, done in crayon with the earnest imprecision of a child's hand. A woman with dark hair. A small wolf with golden eyes, both smiling. At the top, in careful block letters, "Thank you for saving me." Kira's vision blurred. She pressed the drawing to her chest and wept, silent sobs that shook her entire body. It was the first kindness anyone had shown her in 3 years, and it came from a child she'd expected never to see again. A child whose father looked at her like she was a threat. She heard small footsteps retreating down the corridor, quick and light. She wanted to call out, to thank him, but her voice wouldn't come. Instead, she held the drawing like a lifeline and let herself believe, just for a moment, that maybe she wasn't completely alone after all. Theron came to her cell on the 7th night, and Kira knew immediately that something had shifted. He moved differently, less like a predator stalking prey and more like a man carrying a weight he couldn't set down. He dismissed the guards with a curt gesture and stood before the bars, his golden eyes searching her face. "Tell me about Thornwood Vale," he said. "Not the official report. The truth." Kira's breath caught. "How do you know that name?" "Because 3 years ago, an entire pack was declared insurgent and eliminated by royal decree. My decree. Except I never gave that order." His voice was raw, stripped of its usual cold authority. "So tell me what really happened." She told him. The words came like poison she'd been holding in her mouth for too long. The sickness that came first, engineered and precise, targeting the strongest wolves. The way her pack healer couldn't identify it, couldn't stop it. Her little brother Finn burning with fever, her mother's wolf retreating inward until she was just a hollow shell like Kira would become. "Then the soldiers came," she said, her voice breaking. "Not royal guards, mercenaries. They wore black uniforms with an emblem on the shoulder, an obsidian blade crossed with silver chains. They said we were harboring insurgents. They set the pyres while people were still alive." Theron had gone completely still. "What did you say?" "The emblem. Describe it exactly." "An obsidian blade," Kira repeated, watching his face pale, "crossed with silver chains on a field of frost white. The commander who gave the order wore it on a ring, too. I saw it when he shot my father." Theron turned away from her, his hands gripping the stone wall so hard she heard it crack. That's impossible. That's the Frost family crest. Counselor Varen's family. Kira felt the world tilt. The man who wants me executed? Theron spun back to face her, and the anguish in his eyes stole her breath. If what you're saying is true, if Varen's family orchestrated the massacre of your pack and forged documents in my name, then this goes deeper than an assassination attempt. This is treason spanning generations. I watched my entire family burn, Kira said, standing and moving to the bars. I lost my wolf. I've spent 3 years running, hollow and hunted, because someone decided my pack needed to disappear. So yes, Alpha King, it goes deep. They were inches apart now, only the bars between them. The mate bond thrummed like a living thing, pulling them together despite the iron and the accusations and the impossibility of it all. Theron reached through the bars and cupped her face, his touch gentle despite the fury radiating from him. I need proof, he said, but his voice had lost its edge. I need evidence I can bring before the council. Varen is too powerful, too entrenched. Without proof, I'm accusing my father's most trusted advisor of genocide. Then find it, Kira whispered, because I'm telling you the truth. His thumb traced her cheekbone, and she watched something break in his expression. The careful control, the regal distance, it all shattered. He pulled her closer to the bars and kissed her, desperate and furious and inevitable. The mate bond exploded between them, electric and overwhelming. She kissed him back, her bandaged hands gripping the bars, tasting his rage and grief and the terrible acknowledgement that fate had bound them together in the worst possible way. He broke away suddenly, stumbling back from the bars like she'd burned him. His chest heaved, his eyes wild. This alters nothing, he said, but the words sounded hollow even to him. You're still a prisoner. It changes nothing. He fled the cell, leaving her alone with the ghost of his touch and the sick certainty that everything had just changed, whether he admitted it or not. Kira slid down to the floor, her back against the bars, and wondered how you were supposed to love someone who kept you in a cage. Can you imagine losing everything, being called broken, and then finding your soulmate only to be imprisoned by him? If you're feeling this with me, subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Let's build a community that stands against people like Varen who destroyed innocent lives. Only trolls who side with traitors won't subscribe. Sylvan Reed had been Theron's head tracker for 15 years, and in that time he'd learned to trust his instincts above all else. Right now, those instincts were screaming that something was profoundly wrong. He sat in the archives beneath Shadow Peak, surrounded by centuries of documents, comparing 2 signatures in the cold light of a preservation spell. The execution order for Thornwood Vale bore the royal seal, stamped in red wax and signed with Theron's distinctive angular script. Except it wasn't Theron's script. Sylvan had seen the king's signature thousands of times. He knew the pressure points. The slight leftward slant, the way Theron always extended the final stroke. This was close, masterfully done, but it was wrong. He pulled another document from the archives, a land treaty from 20 years prior, signed by the Lord Regent Magnus Frost during the interregnum after the old king's death. He laid them side by side, and his blood went cold. The handwriting matched perfectly. Not Theron's signature, Magnus Frost's, disguised with the royal seal. Sire, Sylvan sent through the mind link. You need to see this, now. In his laboratory, Lysander was having his own revelation. He'd sent samples of Kira's blood to 3 different alchemists sworn to secrecy, and all 3 had returned the same horrified conclusion. The compound wasn't natural, it was engineered. A cocktail of silver particulate, wolfsbane extract, and something else. Something that read like a perverted inversion of the bonding hormone that connected shifters to their wolves. It's designed to sever the bond, one alchemist had written, permanently. I've never seen anything like it. This is weaponized alchemy of the highest order, illegal under every supernatural treaty. Whoever created this meant to commit genocide. Lysander had cross-referenced the compound's signature against the archives of known alchemical weapons. Only one family in the Conclave's history had the resources, knowledge, and access to create something like this. The Frost family, who had served as Lord Regents and advisors for 3 generations. Theron stood on the ramparts of Shadow Peak as another blizzard rolled in, 3 documents spread before him on the stone battlements. Held down against the wind by daggers, Sylvan's evidence of the forged execution order, Lysander's analysis of the weaponized compound, and a financial record that Veron himself had provided weeks ago, showing unusual payments to mercenary companies during the exact period when Thornwood Vale burned. He'd thought Veron was helping him investigate corruption. Now he realized Veron had been feeding him evidence to cover his own tracks, controlling the narrative. The obsidian blade emblem Kira described was the Frost family crest. The Lord Regent's seal on the forged document was Veron's father. The synthetic poison in Kira's blood matched compounds the Frost family alchemists had researched, and the trap that had nearly killed his son. Silver-laced, sophisticated, designed to maim, but not immediately kill. The same methodology used at Thornwood Vale. "Sire," Sylvan said quietly, standing beside him. "If Magnus Frost committed genocide 3 years ago using your seal, and Veron just tried to have Prince Cassius killed to frame a rogue, then this has been happening for decades," Theron finished, his voice hollow. "My father's death, the southern border raids, every conflict we've had with the outer pacts, how many were real and how many were orchestrated." The mate bond pulled at his chest, reminding him that the woman he'd imprisoned was the sole survivor of a massacre committed in his name. She'd lost everything, been hunted as a traitor, spent 3 years hollow and alone, and he'd thrown her in a cell and called her dangerous. "I need Veron investigated," Theron said, quietly. "I need to know every move he makes. Every ally he has, every piece of leverage he holds, and I need it before he realizes we know." "And the prisoner?" Sylvan asked carefully. "Is my mate," Theron said, the words tasting like ash and revelation. "And she's the only person who can testify to what really happened. Which means Veron will do everything in his power to make sure she never speaks again." The council chamber was packed, every alpha and elder of the Obsidian Summit Conclave present for what Veron had called an emergency session. Kira stood in the center, shackled with silver-lined restraints that burned against her wrists, 2 guards flanking her. She could feel their disgust, their certainty that she was exactly what Veron claimed. Theron sat rigid on his throne, his expression carved from ice, giving nothing away. The mate bond hummed between them, a desperate lifeline she clung to even as terror threatened to drown her. Councillor Veron Frost stood before the assembly, grave and measured, holding a small wooden box as if it contained a venomous snake. "It pains me to bring this evidence before you, but my loyalty to the throne demands it. During a routine security sweep of the prisoner's cell, my guards discovered these items hidden beneath the mattress." He opened the box with theatrical precision. A crystal vial filled with dark liquid, a folded parchment sealed with red wax. He held up the vial first, letting the torchlight catch the oily substance within. Nightshade concentrate, mixed with powdered silver and aconite, enough to kill a dozen shifters, or one very young prince. The council erupted. Alpha Garrett surged to his feet, his wolf flashing in his eyes. She planned to finish what she started. She saved the boy to gain access, to get close. And this, Varen continued, unfolding the parchment, is an encrypted message addressed to Commander Aldrich of Iron Ridge. It details the layout of Shadow Peak's private wings, the prince's routines, and a proposed extraction route. The seal has been authenticated. This is Iron Ridge's mark. Kira's world tilted. She'd never seen those items before in her life. I didn't, she started, but her voice was drowned out by the roar of outraged alphas demanding her immediate execution. Enough, Theron said, and the chamber fell silent. His voice was quiet, controlled, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. Counselor Frost, your evidence is compelling. Almost too compelling. Tell me, when exactly did your guards discover these items? Varen's expression remained perfectly composed. This morning, sire. During the routine sweep I ordered after receiving intelligence about Iron Ridge activity. Interesting, Theron said, rising from his throne. Because 3 days ago I ordered Tracker Sylvan to place the prisoner's cell under constant surveillance. Every person who entered or exited was documented. Sylvan, please share your findings. Sylvan stepped forward, unrolling a scroll. 4 people entered that cell in the past week. Healer Lysander, twice daily for medical treatment. Guard Corporal Dennison, for meal delivery. Prince Cassius, once, unauthorized. And Counselor Frost's personal guard, Victor Creel, yesterday evening, carrying a locked box approximately this size. He gestured to the evidence box in Varen's hands. Varen's composure cracked. Just slightly. Victor was conducting a security assessment. Standard protocol. Then you'll be pleased to know we apprehended Victor this morning, Theron said, descending from the throne. He was attempting to flee south with a rather substantial amount of gold. Gold that matches the payments made to the mercenary company that attacked Thornwood Vale 3 years ago. The same mercenary company that bears your family's crest. He pulled out the forged execution order, held it up for the council to see. This document, which ordered the genocide of an entire pack, bears my seal but my father's regent's signature. Your father's signature, Varen. Magnus Frost used his position to commit systematic murder and frame innocent packs as insurgents. The council chamber descended into chaos. Varen's face went from composed to pale to flushed with rage. You have no proof. You have the desperate accusations of a rogue and a forged document. I have Victor's confession, Theron said coldly. I have financial records. I have witness testimony. And I have the survivor of your family's genocide, who you just tried to frame for treason so I would execute her before she could testify. He moved to stand beside Kira, his presence a wall of protection. This woman saved my son's life at the cost of her own. She sacrificed everything, while you, my father's most trusted advisor, have been poisoning this conclave from within for decades. Theron's hand found hers, burned and shackled. She is my fated mate. She is your Luna Queen, and anyone who threatens her threatens me. Varen's mask finally shattered completely, his face contorting with fury and desperation. You would choose a hollow rogue over your own counsel? Over tradition? I choose truth over treachery, Theron said. Guards, arrest Counselor Varen Frost for high treason, conspiracy to commit genocide, and the attempted murder of the Crown Prince. Varen moved faster than anyone expected for a man his age. One moment he was standing accused before the council, the next his hand had flashed to his belt and emerged with a slender blade, its edge glistening with the same dark poison from the planted vial. The guards were too far away. Theron was too close, his attention divided between the prisoner and the council. Varen lunged, the blade aimed directly at Theron's throat with the precision of someone trained for assassination. Time crystallized. Kira saw everything with horrible clarity, the triumph in Varen's eyes, the guards moving too slowly, Theron beginning to shift but not fast enough, not nearly fast enough. Something inside her chest, silent and dormant for 3 years, detonated. The shackles around her wrists exploded, silver-lined metal shattering like glass. Her scream wasn't human. It was primal, cosmic, the sound of something ancient and furious tearing free from imprisonment. The cell doors, the ones she'd been dragged through, blasted inward with a concussive force that sent guards sprawling. Her body convulsed, bones reshaping with audible cracks that should have been agonizing but felt like liberation. Her skin split and reformed, not with brown or gray fur, but with something that made the assembled alphas gasp in disbelief. Silver-white fur erupted across her body, but it wasn't just white. It rippled with color, prismatic light dancing across her coat like the aurora borealis made flesh. Blues and greens and purples cascaded through her fur with every movement, luminescent and otherworldly. The transformation completed in seconds. Where Kira had stood, a wolf now crouched, larger than any natural wolf, nearly the size of Theron's alpha form. Her eyes burned with silver fire. Her fangs gleamed like moonlight on ice. She was the Aurora Wolf, a legend the elders whispered about, the mythical protector that appeared once in 1,000 years. She crossed the chamber in 3 bounds, trailing ribbons of prismatic light. Varen's blade was inches from Theron's throat when she intercepted, her jaws closing around his wrist with perfect precision. She didn't snap the bones, she didn't tear the flesh. She simply held him, immobilizing him completely, the poisoned blade clattering harmlessly to the stone floor. Varen screamed, thrashing in her grip, but she was immovable. Her wolf pinned him to the ground with one massive paw on his chest, jaws still locked around his wrist. She could have killed him. Every instinct howled for his blood, for vengeance for her pack, for her family, for 3 years of suffering. But she held back. She chose restraint. She chose mercy. The chamber had gone absolutely silent, every alpha frozen in shock. Then Theron shifted, his body exploding into his massive obsidian wolf form. Where Kira was light, he was shadow. Where she glowed with prismatic color, he absorbed it into his black coat. They were perfect opposites, perfect complements, 2 halves of a cosmic whole. He padded to her side, his shoulder brushing hers, and the touch sent sparks of light dancing between their fur. The Obsidian Wolf and the Aurora Wolf stood together over the traitor, a living symbol of balance and unity. Theron's golden eyes met her silver ones, and in that moment, without words, they understood each other completely. Varen lay broken beneath them, his carefully constructed facade shattered. His coup failed. The council stared in awe at their king and the mate they demanded be executed, now revealed as the rarest gift the moon goddess had ever bestowed. Kira's jaws remained locked on Varen's wrist, but her eyes held a message clearer than any words. Justice, not vengeance. Truth, not bloodlust. She had reclaimed her power, but she would not become the monster that had destroyed her family. Theron threw back his massive head and howled, a sound of triumph and recognition that shook the fortress to its foundations. Kira joined him, her voice weaving through his in perfect harmony, light and shadow singing together as the council finally understood what they were witnessing. The Aurora Wolf had returned, and she had chosen the Obsidian Summit as her home. Kira's jaws remained locked on Varen's wrist, her luminous gaze boring into him with an intensity that stripped away every layer of pretense. The aurora light dancing across her fur cast shifting shadows across his face, making him look like a man drowning in color. He tried to hold her stare, to maintain some shred of dignity, but the cosmic weight of her presence broke him like kindling. "Tell them," Theron commanded, his obsidian wolf form radiating menace beside her. "Tell them everything, or I let her decide your fate." Varen's breathing came in ragged gasps, his composure completely shattered. "It was my father," he choked out. "Magnus Frost. He believed the Outer Pacts were diluting our bloodlines, weakening the Conclave. He spent 40 years engineering their destruction. The council listened in horror as Varen's confession spilled out like poison from a lanced wound. The weaponized compounds, designed by Frost family alchemists to sever the wolf bond and create hollow shifters. The forged documents bearing royal seals used to justify massacres of innocent packs. Thornwood Vale wasn't the first. There had been 7 others over 3 decades, each one carefully orchestrated. Each one blamed on insurgency or plague or territorial disputes. And my involvement, Varen continued, his voice breaking, began 20 years ago when I discovered my father's work. I could have stopped it. I could have exposed him. But I saw the power in it, the control. So I continued his legacy, the alchemical weapons trade with rogue elements in Iron Ridge, the manufactured conflicts to justify consolidating power, all of it. Alpha Garrett's voice was thick with disgust. You murdered entire bloodlines, children, elders. For what? Political power? For purity, Varen spat, a flash of his old conviction returning. For a conclave strong enough to survive what's coming. But you were all too weak to see it. Especially you, Theron. So sentimental about your dead mate, so protective of your half-breed son. Kira's jaws tightened, drawing blood. Theron's growl shook the chamber walls. Varen screamed and the words came faster. The trap for Prince Cassius was meant to draw you out, to make you reckless. My daughter Elara was positioned to assume regency. She knew nothing of the plan, I swear it, but with you dead and your son crippled, she would have been the logical choice. The council would have demanded stability. You would have murdered my son and crowned your daughter queen over his broken body, Theron said, his voice deadly quiet even in wolf form through the mind link that now included the entire chamber. Yes, Varen whispered. Yes. I would have done anything to save this conclave from your weakness. The chamber erupted. Alphas surged to their feet, howling for immediate execution. Tear him apart, blood for blood. Let the Aurora Wolf have her vengeance. The rage was palpable, centuries of pack law demanding that treason of this magnitude be answered with death. But Kira released Varen's wrist and stepped back, her luminous form radiating calm purpose. She shifted, the transformation flowing like water until she stood human again, naked and glowing with residual light. Someone threw a cloak over her shoulders. She didn't take her eyes off Varen. Death is easy, she said, her voice carrying despite its softness. Death ends the guilt, the shame, the weight of what you've done. My family didn't get that mercy. They burned alive knowing they'd been branded traitors. So you don't get the mercy either. Theron shifted beside her, understanding flooding through the mate bond. He wrapped an arm around her waist, claiming her before the council, and pronounced judgment. Varen Frost, you are sentenced to permanent imprisonment in the shadow cells. No visitors, no contact. You will live with what you've done until natural death claims you. And every day, you will remember that the woman whose pack you destroyed showed you more mercy than you ever showed anyone. Varen's face crumpled, the full weight of his crimes and his survival crushing him. The guards dragged him away as he wept, broken not by death, but by the mercy of those he'd tried to destroy. The transformation back was not gentle. Kira's wolf, awakened for the first time in 3 years and pushed immediately into mythical form, had burned through every reserve of strength she possessed. Her luminescent fur began to flicker like a dying star, the prismatic colors fading to white, then to pale skin. Her legs buckled. Theron caught her before she hit the stone floor, shifting back to human form even as she fell. He cradled her naked, trembling body against his bare chest, and for a moment the Alpha King forgot entirely about the council watching, about Varen groaning on the floor, surrounded by guards, about everything except the woman in his arms who had just saved his life. She's burning up, he said, feeling the fever radiating from her skin. Lysander now. The healer was already moving, but Theron didn't wait. He stripped off his heavy fur-lined cloak, the one that materialized with his shift and bore the obsidian wolf sigil of his house, and wrapped it around Kira with a tenderness that made several council members stare. She disappeared into the folds of fabric that still carried his scent, her dark hair spilling across his arm, her breathing shallow and rapid. He stood, holding her as if she weighed nothing, and turned to face the assembled alphas. They had seen her transform. They had seen the Aurora Wolf, the legend made flesh, choose mercy over vengeance. They had seen her stand beside him as an equal. There would be no more debate, no more accusations, no more questions about her worth. "Witness Kira Blackveil, your Luna Queen," he declared, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "She who saved the air. She who survived genocide. She who returned the Aurora Wolf to our world. Anyone who challenges her challenges me, and anyone who threatens her will answer to both of us." The council, even those who had howled for her execution hours before, dropped to one knee. It wasn't just submission to authority. It was recognition of something greater, something cosmic. The mate bond between an Alpha King and an Aurora Wolf was the stuff of ancient prophecy. Theron didn't wait for their responses. He carried Kira from the chamber, Lysander trailing behind with his medical supplies. The walk to his private quarters felt endless, each step measured against her labored breathing. He kicked open the doors to rooms she'd never seen, passing through a sitting room and study to the inner sanctum, his personal chambers. The Alpha's nest dominated the space, a massive bed piled with furs and silks that carried his scent so strongly it was almost a physical presence. He laid her down gently, arranging the furs around her, tucking his cloak tighter. Lysander checked her pulse, her temperature. His expression concerned but not alarmed. "She needs rest," the healer said quietly. The transformation took everything. Her body needs time to adjust to having her wolf back, especially one this powerful. But she'll survive. She's stronger than any of us realized. After Lysander left, Theron sat on the edge of the nest, watching Kira sleep. Her hands, still bandaged but healing faster now with her wolf returned, rested on top of the furs. He took one carefully in his, mindful of the injuries. "I'm sorry," he said, though she couldn't hear him. "I looked at you and saw a threat when I should have seen a survivor. I imprisoned you when I should have protected you. I almost let my own prejudices blind me to the truth." Her eyes fluttered open, silver instead of their former brown, her wolf now a permanent part of her gaze. "You found the truth," she whispered, her voice raw. "That's what matters." He cupped her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "You are not fleeing anymore," he said. "You are not running, not hiding, not alone. You are home, Kira. This is your home. I am your home." A tear slid down her cheek, but for the first time in 3 years, it wasn't from grief. "Home," she repeated, testing the word. She'd forgotten what it tasted like. He lay down beside her, pulling her into his arms, and she burrowed into his chest with a sigh that sounded like surrender and victory all at once. Her wolf, once silent and broken, now hummed contentedly in her mind, finally at peace. Kira went from dying in the snow to becoming Luna Queen, and Varen's evil plan failed. If you stand against people who commit genocide and frame the innocent, hit subscribe. Comment Aurora Queen if you believe she earned this throne. Haters and people like Varen won't subscribe. Prove you're not one of them. Kira woke to sunlight streaming through windows she didn't remember, in a bed that smelled like winter forests and smoke and him. Her wolf stirred contentedly in her mind, no longer silent, no longer absent, just present and whole, and finally at peace. She flexed her hands and found them nearly healed, pink new skin replacing the charred ruin, her wolf's return accelerating what should have taken months into mere days. "You're awake," Theron said from across the room, and she turned to find him standing by the window, backlit by morning light. He looked different without the weight of suspicion between them, softer somehow despite the hard planes of his face. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been shattered and put back together," she said, sitting up, "but put back together better than before." He crossed to her, sat on the edge of the nest, took her healed hands in his. "The council wants to meet their queen. Officially this time, without accusations and poison." The coronation ceremony 3 days later was unlike anything Kira had imagined in her years of running. She wore silver and white, colors that made her new eyes glow, and stood before the assembled packs with Theron at her side. The alphas who had demanded her execution now bent their knees willingly, recognizing not just her bond to their king, but her own power, her own worth. Alpha Garrett, who had been loudest in calling for her death, approached after the ceremony. "My Luna," he said, his voice gruff with something that might have been shame. "I misjudged you. We all did. The Aurora Wolf chooses her own path, and she chose to show us mercy. That is strength beyond anything I've seen in my 50 years. The best moment came that evening when a small voice called from the doorway of their quarters. "Kira, is it really true? You're staying?" Cassius stood there, his leg fully healed now, his amber eyes bright with hope. Kira dropped to her knees and opened her arms, and the little prince ran into them with the complete trust only children possess. "I'm staying," she promised, holding him tight. "I'm not going anywhere." Theron joined them, wrapping his arms around both of them, and Kira felt something click into place that she hadn't known was missing. Family. Not the one she'd lost, but the one she'd found in the most impossible circumstances. Later, as twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, Theron led her to the ramparts. "Look," he said, gesturing to the vast wilderness spreading out from Shadow Peak. 3 years ago, you crossed that border expecting to die. Now, it's yours to protect." "Ours," she corrected, taking his hand. "We protect it together." He pulled her close, pressed a kiss to her temple. "There will be challenges. Varen's daughter Ilara was exiled, but she has allies. The other packs will test you, test us. The Aurora Wolf's return, it means something. The old prophecies speak of great change." "Let them come," Kira said, and her wolf rumbled agreement in her mind. "I spent 3 years running from my past. I'm done running." As if to seal the promise, they both shifted, the transformation now effortless for Kira. The Obsidian Wolf and the Aurora Wolf stood together on the ramparts looking out over their territory. Then, as one, they leaped down and began to run through the snow-covered forest. Kira's prismatic light trailing behind them like ribbons of color against Theron's shadow. They ran not from anything, but toward everything. Toward the future they would build together. Toward the home she had finally, impossibly, against all odds, found. Above them, the winter moon watched their joined paths through the trees, and if anyone had been listening closely, they might have heard it whisper a single word: destined.